You guys are gonna go on and on about.
See, she had the same idea.
Yeah. Whatever the topic is, yes.
As per usual.
Right.
Right.
Wow. So much love.
It's 6:30.
All right, I'll call the meeting of the Essex Junction City Council to order.
Recording in progress.
Are there any agenda additions or changes?
Yes. I'd like to pull the minutes from the last meeting out of the consent agenda.
Okay, we will make those 5B. And I think we need to add the block party to the consent agenda.
That's right.
That'll be D as well. Great, anything else? Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. All those in favor of approving the agenda as modified, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's approved. Great. Move on to public to be heard. And before we do, I already reminded Bridget, but for folks in the room, please sign in. And for folks online, if you are joining us in Zoom and we aren't able to see your full name, it will not be accurately reflected in the minutes. So please adjust your name in the participants panel in Zoom so that we can accurately reflect your attendance and your comments if you make any. So this is the portion of the meeting where members of the public can bring concerns or comments to the board. And we'll start with Bridget, who's in the room. If you'd like to come up to the, I know, but this way we hear
I'm
you.
loud, but I will. I'm loud, but I will. So I sent you all an email expressing what I was going to bring up, and so here I go. There's a lot of chatter. There's been a lot of chatter, both online and in just out on the street, about the train station, bus station, the condition of that building, and a lot of speculation about what's going on there. Apparently, there was an allocation of some funds, and myself and others want to know how that's going and what the plan is. You know, as succinctly and as much as you know. You may not, so I don't know. I'm just asking.
Okay.
You want me to bring my things one at a time?
Oh, no, let us have it.
All right then. And the second, I wanted to know what the status was of the pocket park. I think I know, but I'm not sure. And in that I'm on that committee, I think I should know, but I don't exactly know what our plan is. So I'd like to know that. And the third thing is, I walk from my house on Pleasant Street to the library, to city, to Lincoln Hall, to all of the, to wherever, through the alley behind Martone's. And there has been a broken window, and I think it's 8 Railroad Avenue, for well over a year. I took a picture of it and sent it to you. It's not just a tiny crack. It's an enormous break in the window. And I mean, I suppose there are some who would say, does it really matter? But I think if you don't value where you live, if you don't value it by hoping and planning that the properties in your downtown will be taken care of, you're kind of on the, losing side of all of this, especially since I've lived here 22 years. And most of you remember also, there have been several efforts to rejuvenate that area, and some have been successful and some not quite. But I just think we need to pay attention to that. I didn't do what I should have done, which is look through the ordinances and see if there's anything. I know there are ordinances in other communities that you cannot have a damaged property or a vacant property or any of those things for a significant period of time, and then you're fine. So I don't know if that's a question for you or the planners or whomever, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention so you could keep it in do what you can. I'm not sure what that is, but I hope you can do something.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it.
As to the first one, the bus station, train station, I'm going to ask Regina, who is vastly more knowledgeable on the exact status of that right now than I am, to maybe answer that.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can. Hello.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so the Amtrak station, we have a number of documents that we need to fill out in order to move to the next steps of that project. There's essentially just an initial design done of it, so we still have to do final design and then move forward to construction. I just want to make sure everybody's aware that the Amtrak project is really a envelope over the existing building. It is not a total reconstruction. It really is putting on a new roof and sides essentially to that building. So just to explain what will ultimately happen there. And really the holdup on that, moving that forward, has been on staff. As soon as we get a town planner, sorry, I keep saying that, city planner, we'll be able to really move that project forward. Main Street Park, those funds, we did get that grant, and we've got that grant money for 2 construction seasons. So at the beginning of this construction season, considering we have 3 others happening in the exact same vicinity essentially right now, that is just on hold until we can get through some of that and free up some staff resources to think through moving that project forward. And so hopefully by late fall, we can move that forward to bid so that we're ready to go next construction season on that. I saw the photo of the broken window that Bridget sent over, and I will have to look through that further. I don't know that there's anything in the ordinances that we can do about that, but we'll certainly take a look.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, Regina, and some of you know as well, that there was a design plan for the train bus station. Help me out here, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, UVM students, and I want to say they worked with John Alden and came up with a great plan. There was a great community meeting about that. I don't know if that's what you're talking about or if it's another design plan. But I definitely remember that meeting and seeing the what was planned there. And I think that overall, and this probably isn't the right place to say this, Belgium. Overall, I'm a little disappointed that we're hiring a planner before a code enforcement person. We have needed code enforcement in this city, village and now city, since I moved here. And we're really paying a high price in terms of everything. Not by not having one, because people do whatever they want to do. They widen their driveways, they put additions on. The village city is infamous for not having that in place. There's no one who is looking at what happens here, and I think that there maybe. What I'm looking for is some kind of, I know you're committed to hiring someone and that's great, but I'd love to light a fire under that because we're just going to continue to have trouble unless we have someone who's out there on the street, that's my opinion, looking for what's going on here. And we haven't had it since I've lived here for 22 years. That's a long, long time. So that's my take, but thank you for your answers. And I'll be eager to see what happens. I mean, the train station, bus station is not only needs a redesign, it's pretty shabby. I mean, just in terms of maintenance and care. And I don't know whether that's the bus, whether it's Chittenden and whether it's Green Mountain Transit or the trains people. I don't know, but it looks pretty awful, And again, it presents a picture to people who are coming and going through our community that in some ways we don't care. And I think that's way too bad. And I'd like to see us work on that a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.
Bridget.
Is there anyone in Zoom? I'm seeing one person, but is there anyone on Zoom who has anything to add for public to be heard? I'm not seeing anyone, so we will move on to the first business item, which is the discussion and consideration of strategic plan consultant selection. I don't know who's taking that. Ashley, great.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to discuss the Community Vision and Strategic Action Plan RFP. As you guys know, back a few months, I came to you with the draft version of that, and with your feedback, we put that RFP out. We received 5 proposals from consultant groups, and they're listed in the memo here. After we got those 5 RFPs, we put together a selection committee that consisted of the staff, the city council members, and some of our committee members to help us evaluate these proposals and to ultimately select who we'd be going with. The committee met and evaluated those, and out of that evaluation and conversation, we came up with 2 finalists, which was Future IQ and Creative Discourse Group. We decided that we wanted to interview those 2 groups, and so the committee then met with those 2 groups and interviewed them, and after that interview process, we did decide to move forward with Future IQ as the consultant we would like to move forward with. The big difference between the 2 of them was really not anything to do with their work. We felt that they both could do this project and do it very well. It was their approach and the cost of the project. And so that was really kind of some of the evaluating criteria of that. So the committee felt that Futures IQ proposal really aligned more with the RFP that we presented. We felt that they could widely engage our community, provide staff with additional support. We're very data driven in the information that they were providing us, and they provided an additional value added items such as an online project portal and a communication plan. So Future IQ's budget did come in at $30,000. They did also include additional budgeted items that were options, and the selection committee did believe that some of those options would enhance the project. So the selection committee is coming to the council tonight asking for you guys to consider an increase to the budget to $42,500 to add some of these additional options into the project. Staff has looked at the budget and looked at the rebranding effort money that we did put aside for that, and we're suggesting that we take the $12,500 to come out of that rebranding to pay for this, and it will leave $27,500 in for the rebranding effort. So that sums up the project. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have and give any more feedback that you need.
Thank you. I'm going to move the TVs. Any counselors have any questions for Ashley?
I have several questions.
Yeah.
What was the difference in price between Creative Discourse and Future IQ?
So again, like I said, Future IQ came in at $30,000 with just their main budget, which is on page 24 of their proposal. I'm not for sure what it is in the packet, but there is some options that were highlighted in red. So all of their options highlighted in red added would have brought their project up to $47,500. We didn't believe that all of those options were beneficial. So we chose to add the steering committee monthly meetings, the key stakeholder interviews, and the community vision sessions, which brought us up to that total of $42,500. The creative discourse group, on the other hand, their proposal was broken up into phase 1, 2, and 3, and then phase 4. And so phase 1, 2, and 3 was going to be organizing the committee, analyzing some of our documents that we had, some planning documents, conducting the visioning process, which would include a survey and some listening sessions. And for that price, they came out at $28,560. To add on the phase 4, which is the action plan of the proposal. So we were asking for a vision and an action plan is what we asked for in the RFP. So to just do phase 4, which would be the planning committee meeting again, doing their research and writing based off of the visioning information and the information that they gathered throughout their interviews, doing some more outreach to review and refine the plan, and then presenting the plan to us would be an additional $24,225. So while they both came up over budget, Future IQ's budget was not as much as Creative Discourse. And even if we didn't go with the additional options that Future IQ offered, they were giving us a full plan. So it was all going to be included, whereas we would have to spend more money with Creative Discourse no matter what if we wanted a full plan.
Got it. And who are the trustees, excuse me, the
It's gonna be a
city
long time.
councilors
Should be a
that?
while.
Marcus and Andrew.
Awesome, okay. I'm just curious, what spoke to me with the Future IQ proposal, and it was addressed in the cover memo, which I really appreciate, was that there were no specific efforts listed to engage marginalized communities, and there was no acknowledgement of the necessity for a future city to be more inclusive. And so I'm just really struck by the pretty much utter lack of addressing inclusion and diversity. There is one place where it talks about engaging the different aspects, the demographics of our community, but I kind of thought we were really leading towards becoming a more diverse community, and I just don't see that at all in this proposal. And so I'm curious what was the thinking around that piece of the committee?
I'll say that we did actually address that in the interview process, because that was something we were thought and when we initially read the proposal as well. So I will say that that was some of the discussions that we had, and we felt that their answers from the interview process did address those things. They do have in here information, I forget what the name of their, that they brought up. Sorry, I'll have to look back through their. The town of Hilton Head Island, where they kind of did a whole approach around their native islander there in South Carolina. So that's a big part of the island there. And so that was some of their work that they touched on in the interview process that they had done with that. But they also wanted us to consider, obviously, the marginalized people, but also the people that we might not think about, such as working families. And so they did have those aspects that also Creative Discourse had as well. Creative Discourse's proposal leaned more towards the engagement, and while we definitely think that that's important, that was their main focus of this project, and we really want to have an ultimate action plan at the end of the day to move us forward. Now, do we need to work on engagement? Of course we do, but that's not something that's a one project time. That is something we start now and we continue to do throughout everything that we do. And it's something that I feel that we need to continuously work on.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
also, if I may, they did address their work experience with diverse communities and stakeholders on page 5 of their submission. It's a full page with 7 different pieces of work they've done in other communities specifically for that purpose.
Couple other questions. One was they mentioned a couple different times that they intend to use SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Did they talk about any other? I didn't see like any other sort of approaches, like maybe appreciative inquiry, or like they're definitely focus groups, and they seem to have a branded method called the think tank. I guess what I'm trying to get at is I want to make sure that this process is as forward thinking, and while SWOT analysis is very important, it's also, I think, a little outdated at this point, and appreciative inquiry is more of the way we look at things like strategic planning for communities. Just want to make sure it's more forward thinking and not less strategic, that's not the right word, but I want to be sure that they are taking a variety of approaches and not just using the ones that are more economic development oriented, but also community development oriented.
I'm going to jump in and say to that, I both love the data-driven part and was concerned about the data-driven part connected to the SWOT analysis part.
Yeah.
So this whole process, my main concern goes very well with what Elaine is saying. My main concern in this whole thing is engaging. Our biggest difficulty, and we'll talk about this a lot later, is how do we reach people? And it's a big group of people. It's a majority of the people in the community, quite frankly, I think.
Yeah.
And so that is something I'm just really concerned about.
Yeah.
And it goes to that. The data-driven thing is great. If it's melded with everything else. So I think this looks good. But yeah, that's something that occurred to me too.
I would add to that what I would want to encourage them to do and to include is I didn't see any reference to communicating or doing conversations with our committees, our planning commission, our bike walk. I mean, we have been actively trying to bridge the gaps between us and those groups and then be amongst those groups. So I would expect that to be a part of this process because they say they're going to interview staff and key people. I think it might need to be a little bit more broad, and and I don't want to make it sound like I don't appreciate the hard work of you and the committee and this organization that's presenting their proposal, but I just want to highlight those areas where I really feel it's important for them to kind of stretch, and I would expect it to be included and not an extra to have those kinds of conversations.
So if I may jump in on this. So first off, on the analysis piece, I felt it during the interview because we had that same concern concerning SWAT, that they addressed that by acknowledging the fact that they were using other methods as well and bringing that all to fruition. They did show us some examples from some other communities in those reports. And so coming out of that, I felt more comfortable that the way that they were looking at it was, again, we're going to get this data, we're going to look at this data, we're going to do it in a couple different ways. We're going to take a 30,000 foot view and take a look at it. We're also going to be able to slice and dice. The other thing to mention for what you said specifically, and I think this was kind of resolved through the discussion that we had during the interview, in the fact that we want to see those parts of our community represented. That steering committee, as we discussed during the interview process, not only should include people from marginalized communities, it should also represent and have members from our other committees on it as well to participate. So while they will get interviewed by Future IQ during this process, they will, by I think the way they acknowledged it, they will also participate in these other ways in that process. I do want to say in the overall, as we looked at this, the delta between these five was huge.
Saw that.
So at the end of the day, the two that we looked at were the closest to it. Mm-hmm. But I think the strongest thing, and I hear exactly what you're talking about, and we did go after this in the interview. The big difference really was, again, that approach at the end of the day. Because we recognize Creative Discourse did a valuable job with heart and soul. So we recognize that particular experience, but their approach seemed a little off from what we had said we wanted the RFP. And when we addressed it in the interview process, we were still going down the road about communication and engagement versus talking about feeling more strongly about the strategic plan at the end of this. So I think coming out of that, we really did feel that Future IQ addressed some of these concerns. I would say if we need more input on that to address the concerns you may still have, I think we should ask for that. But again, even in these final two, the delta felt wide in what was going to be delivered. I will also acknowledge that in our discussion, it was also said, knowing the fact that we felt strongly that engagement is a strong portion of what we want and we need, it just wasn't in this RFP. There is a discussion, I think, for us to have, and we acknowledge this during that meeting, that we should talk about whether or not maybe Creative Discourse or another group, but with that in mind, do some other work with us to help improve our engagement. And because we saw value in what they were offering us, it just wasn't the right fit for this particular RFP.
I appreciate you saying that, Marcus, because like Ashley said, of course we know that we need to work on that. and yet it's not part of this strategic planning for the next 5 years. And so that's a huge gap. And I think, I don't know if that means doing another RFP specifically for that thing, although on our conversation later this evening about engagement, we'll touch on this as well. But we should absolutely be focusing on inclusivity at every step of every project we undertake.
Yes.
And this goes back even to our Essex governance group, where we were recommended a communications plan, which I told you I would get to you months ago, and I've yet to send that to you. My apologies. But how to communicate with the public just on a regular basis, depending upon what the topic is, who needs to know, how we do it. Even that most basic of communications is not in place yet. So, we will address that. And the only other thing I want to point out, and this is just me expressing a concern, Creative Discourse does know us. They know Vermont very, very well. Future IQ said they know Vermont. They had one Vermont project amongst all the list of all the towns they could have sent to us, and it was a forestry project. And they kept referring to us as an urban center. And while, yes, we are getting there, I'm concerned that they're not understanding the interplay between urban and rural that exists right out there. So I just want to put that out there that we are rapidly approaching urban in many respects, especially as a transportation hub, but everybody who lives here still thinks we're a village. And everybody who lives here can go 5 minutes up Route 15 and be in the woods. So they have some experience in Maine. I just want to, it felt like a disconnect for me for them to really assert how well they know Vermont. It does not appear to be the case from their proposal. So I'm just pointing these things out as a reader of the proposal, and I appreciate and I'm grateful to everybody who did the vetting of each proposal and made the ultimate decision. Those are some of the things I'm going to be watching for as we go through the process.
The only other thing, if I could just really quick, that I wanted to piggyback on with the community engagement side of this, and it's talked about in the next memo. You did a great job about how it really was a separate project. Community engagement really was outside of the scope of this RFP. It's something we should pick back up. Whoever we went with, both entities or all 5 of the entities have a process to get to a strategic plan. Who then informs that is going to be really incumbent upon us. It's going to be incumbent upon the steering committee. It's going to be incumbent upon staff. It's not going to be incumbent upon whoever gets this contract or whoever we award this RFP to. And it took me a little while to get that through my own head in this process. So we can say we want this, that, and the other thing, but ultimately it's not going to be on Future IQ if we go with them. It's not going to be on Creative Discourse. It really is going to be upon us to make sure that we have the right people for that steering committee, because they're going to be the people who they then meet with Future IQ on a regular basis and are going to be the point people who are reaching out to and informing the community beyond. So when we get to that point in this process, make sure that we keep this back in mind, that we have the right people to help reach the right people.
Because that engagement is so multi-layered. It's all about, right, I mean, this is silly to say all that sometimes, but it's relationships, it's being out there.
Absolutely.
It's everything we'll talk about later. And I think we should have serious conversations about how we get some facilitation around that, whether it be partially funded by grants, we find it another way. I think that just goes to everything else. But the considerations you bring up, I mean, it goes as deep as all the policy review we're going to do. You know, everything that gets done basically has that lens or multiple lenses that we haven't traditionally applied. And I think that does sound like it's probably outside of the scope of this. But it's absolutely worthwhile to come back.
I will also acknowledge, based on your last comment, so, because I think in reading their response to our RFP, it's the right tone and language. Having worked with agencies, knowing the fact that you gotta come out with a certain level of confidence and you have to pitch yourself. But his first initial comment to us in the interview was, I'm looking forward to deep diving into the village city story. So he acknowledged to us that he understands there's there's a story, there's a history here that they also need to understand as part of this particular process to then look forward. So just to acknowledge what you said there. So I think, again, we, going through the interview process, we had concerns, but I think coming out of it, we had a lot of valuable information. We felt more confident. We acknowledged, the other thing I want to acknowledge too was staff effort, because looking at what both were proposing and again, what they were, their style and the way that they were going to approach it, I think Future IQ will give the staff more support at the end of the day versus Discourse. Really, it felt, I'll say it felt to me, I think universally, we all kind of felt this though, that this was going to be really the staff effort with them from behind kind of helping guide. Whereas Future IQ felt like they were going to be involved in participating. Because one of the other things that we were concerned about, because again, you're right, they're here in our community, they're in our backyard. But the interactions when we started to ask Future IQ, because we were concerned about like, how often are you going to come visit us? How often are you going to, however often we need them to, you know, so they started to acknowledge and I felt like they wanted to participate and they wanted to get to know us along with them putting all these pieces together. And again, I have to echo exactly what Andrew said about it. Then it becomes incumbent on us to really put together that steering committee that's going to make this all work exactly the way we want to, because we all have the same exact intention you described.
And I will say that I did reach out to some of their references that they provided, and actually one of the references that they didn't provide, which is the town in Maine that they mentioned during the interview process. And they have all had glowing recommendations from them. One of them was actually from a rural kind of outskirt of Kansas City, Missouri. And she said, our dynamic here is we are more urban now, but everyone thinks that we're rural. She's like, and they actually have done 5 projects with Future IQ. They started out with their strategic plan, moved on to their comprehensive plan, then their parks and recs, then their transportation. And they've started their strategic plan, and then they're encompassing that within all of their other plans. And so it's all building a cohesive thing. And the work that they did there, their school district is now using Future IQ to move them forward with their strategic planning process. And then the other 2, I spoke with the forestry. They're still in the middle of their project with Future IQ, and they had said everything is going great. There's nothing we would change right now. And then the last one was the town in Maine, which was not originally part of our references, but they had mentioned them during the interview process as saying they're very similar to the city of Essex Junction when we look at what you guys have and the work that we did there. And they were in a complete upheaval and within their community where things were changing, and it was during the pandemic. And they said, he laughed at me and he said, I figure if I asked David, we would be one of their top 5 hardest customers. But he was gracious and he was patient with us, and he went back and forth with us, and he probably lost money going back and forth with us as much as they did. And so just the recommendations from those references that I had made me feel even more confident in our decision moving forward. They do have a more national and international lens. And so even in our discussions when we were first starting this RFP, part of that was, how are we going to compare nationally and internationally? And I think that they will have maybe that broader lens for us to look for. And there is some, as we talked in our committee meeting, there is some benefit to having somebody who's not known here that might have a different of ideas. So we'll put that forward as well to kind of help maybe alleviate some of those concerns that you have, Elaine.
No, I appreciate that, Ashley. Thank you.
I have a slightly different question.
Yeah.
So staff is recommending that we take some money out of the rebranding effort. So I'm going to assume that staff feels like we can do that. But we haven't seen any kind of budget for rebranding or anything, or list of what that's going to be. So I'm just going to ask out loud. Are we good with that? Because we don't know.
Yeah. Regina, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah. So I would say that we don't know exactly, but it seemed like in order to make this project work, to get to the product with the right level of engagement, activities along the way. 42.5 seems like the right amount. And for the rebranding effort, you know, on the one hand, Ashley has been able to sort of switch over the village logo to a city logo. And on the one hand, that's pretty great fix for the time being. But I think definitely we want to take more of a look at that and figure out how to get the actual names switched out on all of the parts and pieces.
Okay. I think, I'm just speaking for myself, I think there's going to want, if there's going, I think, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I'm personally going to want to see an effort to look at the logo in its totality moving forward. So that's going to be not inexpensive, probably, if we engage a professional. So I'm just putting that out there. I think I'm grateful for what has been done so far. We need to move, we need to move on and move forward. But I think longer term, I think it'd be great if we can still try to figure out how to have a larger effort to do that. Okay. Just wanted to
I'm
check in.
kind of hoping some insight comes from this effort that would help that effort.
Yeah.
Because
And that's what I was thinking.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
the
think this is a
expectations level right now, so-
reprioritization right now where the
Yeah.
funds are, but
Okay.
we'll have to re-engage that.
And I feel like there's a lot of things too, whenever we're building the conversation that we want Future IQ to have with our community, to really think about some things like, hey, how can we throw some engagement pieces in there? Like, how do you want to engage with the city of Essex Junction in a survey? Or how do you currently engage with the city of Essex Junction? The same way with rebranding. Like, what do you think I think those kind of things, like, what do you think our city is known for? And what are some ideas associated around our city? I'm hoping that those will come out of the strategic planning process and we can help guide some of that direction as well. I don't feel like they're going to be like, this is what we're asking and you don't get any input on it. I feel like it's going to be definitely conversation with what we feel that we need as a community and what they're going to, how they're going to approach that.
Okay. I'm going to call on Amber because I just looked at my Zoom screen here and she has her hand up and I couldn't see her on the big screen. So Amber, sorry about the wait.
No worries. So Marcus kind of touched upon the one concern that I had, which was the difference between how much they were going to be doing remote versus in person. And it sounds like this was touched upon in the interview, and I'm hoping that you guys can just share that with the rest of us that weren't in the interview.
Number. How they addressed it with us is the fact that it's really based on our desire and our need. It really did sound like, especially initially, they're going to probably be on site because they're going to want to be here for those initial interviews. They're going to want to be here to potentially engage with people, especially as we start to talk about marginalized communities or specialized communities, that they might engage them specifically in their territory, whatever you want to call it, on their turf. So there was going to be those moments, but that's the best way for me to address it right now because there was no absolute number of them. But it really felt like if we felt at some point that they were shorting us, we would make the call and then they would correct it. So I felt that was addressed.
I think they kind of addressed it in the proposal and saying that they were going to go into places like, housing developments and stuff like that, and try to see people, and also addressing one of the things that we struggle with, which is, not everybody's watching, reading Front Porch Forum, and not everybody has the ability to get to technology and stuff. So I really would hope that they are going to follow through with that component of the proposal. And I have no reason to doubt they wouldn't, but it's a little confusing from section 5 because they have they highlight virtual versus in-person presentation, and it looks like the only one that's marked is actually the final presentation to us. So I'm gathering that most of it will be in person, but that was just me reading between the lines.
out with them and just be very specific of which one of these are virtual, which one are in person. And they were like, these are definitely in person. These were definitely, or these can be virtual if you want them to be, or they can be in person. And I asked the other question was, is there any additional cost? And they were like, no, all of our cost is upfront. We don't tack on any additional cost for travel or anything like that. So that was something that they did address to an email personally to me, because that was something that even after our interview, I'm like, I just want to make sure.
Yeah. I think again, to this, not to repeat myself over and over, but again, this comes back to some of this labor will fall on the steering committee. And again, if we want to make sure that these communities are reached, we want to make sure that these things are happening, we have to find the right steering committee to make that happen.
Anything else?
Before we get to a motion, the only other thing I just wanted to mention, in the past, these kinds of decisions and RFP reviews would be done by staff behind closed doors, closet, if you will. Not necessarily something that's very open to everybody else. This committee had 6 people who were not staff members, who were elected officials, appointed individuals on committees, which outnumbered the number of staff who were part of this. And so personally, I just really appreciated the openness that staff had in this process to help really diversify the opinions and to really just engage the community, if you will, in this process. So Ashley, Regina, I just thank you for allowing that, really open this process up.
That's great.
And let me pile on to that by saying it was great because there was a lot of various expertise in the room that brought a lot of really great questions and a lot of great experience to the process, to planning, to strategic thinking, and it was really helpful through the whole process. So yeah, it was great. Thank you for that.
See, it started even before the project. So,
Yeah.
We'll take public comment on this, see if anybody has anything they want to add to it. Bridget's in the room. Do you have anything to add, Bridget? You've got a 3-comment limit tonight.
I've been involved in several of these over the years that I've lived here.
Hey, Bridget.
Yes, sorry, pardon me. You come up, yes. Thank you.
Having been involved in several of these over the years since I've been here, and I remember the first one was with Charles Safford doing a strategic plan. I'm always hopeful. And yet I'm a little cynical. I mean, it's when we did OVOV, we sat down the first time we met. I said, I can't be involved unless we are door to door, unless we're speaking to everyone. A lot of the efforts that I've been involved with come back to speaking to what you all have as good a memory as I do, probably 800, maybe, that kind of thing. I really am not going to be satisfied with that. For me personally, I'm just talking about me personally now. And I think that we have to make a greater effort to engage with people we don't normally engage with, which means going to them. It does not mean focus groups, great, all that, that's fantastic. But it doesn't really get to the nitty gritty of this community. So my inclination would be to watch that and see how they're, and I don't mean watch overlord. I mean, I'll be a part of it. That's what I'm looking for. How are we going to engage 2,000 people? How are we going to have 2,000 answers to questions about what do you love about Essex Junction and what would you change? Because strategically, those are the questions, okay? And then my other issue is that a lot of these documents, when they're finished, are put on a shelf and never looked at again, or occasionally looked at again, but probably never looked at again. And I guess that I'd like to see a living document, something living, something alive, something that we can refer to and say, wait, we said that by 2030, I don't know, I'm making this up, we're going to be yada yada, we're going to have a community center and it will be hosting or having yoga classes and art classes. I'm making all of this up. But we said that in 2023 or 2024 and nobody's looked at that again. You know what I mean? And it's really easy not to look at it. It's really easy to not see where you've not measured up. And I feel like that's what I'm going to be watching for. And again, not as an overlordy person, but this is probably the fourth thing I've been involved with like this since I moved here. And I really think it's a great idea. And I'm really, really hopeful. And maybe this group has the way to do this. This is an incredibly difficult community to engage. Incredibly difficult. We were only successful with OVOV by doing the door-to-door part. And it was a tremendous amount of work. And we had crazy deadline, but we did it. And that's what works. People want to engage one-on-one. They want you, their neighbor, to say to them or ask them these questions that I'm sure will be asked by this group. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Can
you.
I just add to that
Yep.
real quick? Bridget is absolutely right. The door-to-door piece is critical. And I'm not saying that we have to have these folks develop a door-to-door. However, it's not a bad idea. And I also want to just reflect back on the last time we had an enormous community engagement process was when we were quizzing the community on separation and merger. And even that didn't get 2,000 responses.
No.
But we did at OVOV because we went to every single door. So, yeah.
And Heart and Soul was 2 years, which engaged just over 1,000 people
Right.
That's right.
with
Right.
2 communities. So
I think we're jumping an agenda.
we are, but expectations as well. A little bit of expectations.
You're absolutely right, but
No,
that's
it's
what I'm
true.
saying. Like, if we could,
Yes.
whatever the largest version of outreach that this plan aims toward should really have a door-to-door aspect to it. Even if it's just one, bunch of clipboards and 3 questions, like some kind of qualitative and quantitative data collection, they'll get better scientific or statistically relevant results if they go door to door.
I just want to say something about what Bridget said too. I get where you're coming from. I tend to bring a whole bucket load of cynicism with me. But we are at a really interesting time right now where we're starting a community again.
Yeah.
We've got a committee next year or sometime in the next 18 months that is going to look at how we're governed. It's going to look at all of that. That's going to come on the heels or overlap with this project. We are going to start looking at policies. We're going to start looking at other things. We're going to start continue to look at planning code. There's so much going on right now that I really feel enthusiastic that this will actually be used. It's coming at almost the perfect time and frankly, there's so much going on that it's like trying my patience. I just want to get it going already. So I do hear you. I do think though that this chance has a better opportunity than many of the other ones to actually make an impact. So hopefully in 4 years, when you play that back, it's true.
Yeah.
But I do think we're well positioned to actually use this and use it really well.
Well, and during the discussion, obviously we acknowledged the fact that they needed to have the history, so we made sure that they had understood what the Heart and Soul project was and what that went through. OVOV was also brought up, so that was important to make sure that we vocalized to them because obviously that experience was a good one for us. And we want them to be aware of that experience so again they can play off it. But again, to go back, I'm with you. That's why I think this action plan in the RFP is going to be so important because that in itself is going to be the thing that part of this that we'll walk away from, that we'll be able to go check. This one's been sitting here forever. What's going on here? Check. Hopefully it's more checks than blanks, but that's one of the pieces I'm really looking forward to with this process.
And remember that these people walk away after they've done this.
Right.
It's our responsibility
Yeah.
to follow through,
Right.
to see that it has happened. And I think that's another major kind of downfall of doing this kind of thing, is it's done, great, on the shelf, and hey,
Is there anyone in Zoom land who has a comment on this that would like to offer
Yeah.
that now? Not seeing anyone, so I will entertain a motion if the board is so interested.
I'll move that the city council increase the budget of the community vision and strategic action plan project to $42,500 with additional funds coming from the rebranding effort in the local option tax fund, and for the city manager to initiate a contract with Future IQ.
I will second.
Sorry, motion in a second. I don't know what I was waiting for. Sorry, I was waiting for you.
You got this one.
We have a motion in a second. Any comment? No? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Regina. All right, backing up in business item 5B, discussion of council communication policy and strategies. Find it. Who wants to do,
I can start us off.
yeah, maybe. Can't see anybody there we are. Okay, there you are. Hi.
Hi. Okay, so if folks recall, back after the council orientation, we identified two older village documents as part of that orientation process. One is the communications policy and one is the meeting policy. We'll bring the meeting policy forward potentially at the end of the month, but we really wanted to get the communications policy in front of you in light of sort of the theme of this meeting that we're having tonight. Thank you to Raj and Elaine for working on this and for Ashley as well. So the communications policy itself, there's a clean version for you in the packet to look at. And there's kind of two parts to this agenda topic. The first is essentially taking a look at that communications policy and seeing if it works and makes sense. And really this does a great job of defining people's roles and how you communicate with the public, really in terms of the official city business that we have going on. So probably makes sense to sort of go through this first, if anybody has any thoughts and comments. Then we can kind of circle back to the next half of the agenda item, which kind of carries on from what we were just talking about under the RFP process, which is how do we actually do a better job engaging folks and especially underrepresented folks.
So
Is that a good starting part?
That's great. I just want to acknowledge that a lion's share of this, if not almost all of it, was done by Elaine. So I appreciate the shout out, but this was Elaine's lift for the most part. I had other things going on.
There was a
And
lot of
I-
editing in that document. It wasn't just me.
Yeah.
There's
So
a lot
actually,
of crossing out in
and
that thing.
So I tried to keep up with the track changes. I very much largely agree with what was done, but I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Any comments from anyone on that?
I do. The first thing I just, the one thing that stuck out for me is this is a communication policy. So being a policy, I'm curious what the consequences are for violating said policy. Because if this were guidelines, it's perfectly fine. But as a policy, I start to wonder then there's no teeth here.
I wasn't going there.
I wouldn't, can I?
Yes.
I wouldn't look at this as a policy with a punitive aspect. I don't know that all of our policies have a punitive aspect to them. And I think many of them do serve as guidelines. And I think that this is just falling into that same, this is how we address official business that this board does. I think some of the consequences of not following this policy are going to rear their ugly heads, whether they come from the staff or from the chair, but more likely from the public. And I have found that communication missteps, there's no need for consequences in the policy because you get your consequences pretty quickly in all sorts of ways. That I don't know that we need to delineate here, but some of them could be things like, you may say something and your chair might reach out to you on the side and say, not the best course of action.
remember what our policy says. I think this, in this case, I think these are guidelines and not, but it is also policy because it's binding to committee members, to council members, and to staff. So as such, therefore, it's a formal policy. But I think the consequences sort of are, what's the word? Organic.
Yeah. Well, I think about
Ask me how I know.
examples. I think about examples, right? And when we talk about within the policy disseminating honest, truthful information in a world where your truth, it depends on where you sit. And sometimes your truth is your opinion, not necessarily facts on a sheet. So then it's a matter of I put out information to the best of my knowledge. How you then we choose to respond. I get, so it gets a little muddy here, and I don't want to. So, but generally speaking, I will say, as far as this document is concerned, I feel good about it. It's just a matter of I start to think of examples in the past, and I agree that there is a consequence that will come from the public if speak for myself, if I say something untoward. But I've also seen in recent history where people have spoken untruths and they still seem to be celebrated for it. So, but anyway.
Well,
just leave
the
it
thing
at
is that we shouldn't be doing that. And that's
Yeah.
who this policy covers, it's not anybody else. Pardon me?
Travis, is it possible to see Amber on there as well? Thank you so much. I think, this is almost, part policy guideline and code of conduct kind of stuff. I kept thinking when I was reading it, and I've talked to Regina a little bit about like wild tangents about some of this stuff, but we can come back and modify this too. And I think what's likely to happen as we move forward in the next year or two, partly with what we just talked about, partly as what we're going to talk about next, as we, I'm going to be positive, get more adept at engagement, we may decide that there's a different way we want to structure this. We may say, your question months ago, what is the role of clerk? We're going to get to some of that conversation in a minute, but might be as the voice of the board, So I think to your point about disseminating factual information, and this goes into it, we have to make sure we're right, or not say it, or make sure that we don't put staff in a position, because almost everything we say could put staff in a position of having to either correct us or do something because we said it was this way.
Yeah.
So I think, understanding that there are other people impacted by what we may or may not say is part of the consequence of, slowing down a little bit. But I think it's pretty basic. I mean, a lot of this was in place. A lot of this seems to have come from the town.
Yeah, this is probably 40% former village policy and 60% new town policy.
Yeah. The other thing I want to just acknowledge is I appreciate that the expectation is built in here in regards to communication that comes from the public to us. As often we've spoken about, and we as a group blind copy each other because of the fact that we don't want to violate open meeting law. I think it's important that the public understand, because often I think we all encourage communication from the public to its council. And so recently in the case, Bridget, I'll point you out, you sent an email that CC'd multiple of us. And I appreciated that this document acknowledged the fact that the acknowledgement would probably come from the chair. Now we can debate whether or not that's right or wrong, but I appreciated that because of the fact that I think most of the public doesn't
Yeah.
know or have that know what that expectation is about where that communication is going to come from. So I appreciate that it was in this document.
A few years ago, I don't think it's currently on the city website, but a few years ago, we used to have a little intro paragraph on the village trustee page that said, was basically like how to interact with the village trustees. Like if you and it literally said, if you email all of us together, you're only going to hear from the chair because open meeting law. However, one of us may get back to you after we've all agreed. Like we explained to the public, this is what happens when you email us as a group. And I think after we, approve this and we also take care of the meeting policy, that maybe we also address the public on our website to say, this is how you can interact with us and be super clear. This is what happens when you do this. This is what happens when you post on Facebook and you at us, and how we have to interact with people so that they understand.
And we may discover as we go down the engagement road a bit more and get deeper into, and become successful, let's say, in reaching communities we haven't reached before, that we need to adjust this. So to make it, we may be erecting barriers that we're not aware of. And I think a lot of how governance in Vermont works is set up that way and makes it difficult. And I think this is just one example of potentially some unintended consequences of making it overly difficult to have frank conversations with decision makers. So anyway, I think we can amend this at any time.
Yeah.
And
so I wonder if that piece of the policy, again, expectation on response, shouldn't be, if we can't come up with a creative sentence, that we might put in our signature lines for our emails, for instance. So that again, if they respond to us, maybe we auto reply with, hey, we've received, this is the expectation of response, based on something. Just so that again, because I'm glad that it's in this document, but again, as acknowledged before, this document will live somewhere else and people will have to be reminded.
you're right. And I, as the chair, I need to get used to making sure I'm fulfilling this and making sure you're all aware. Because very often, every day, it's a different collection of who gets, I'm included on one, and it might be Elaine, and then the next hour it might be Andrew and I. And a lot of, naturally, because Andrew was president for 4 years. That still happens a lot. Sorry about that. Anyway, so I need to do better. I'll do better with the inclusionary CCing and forwarding. But Marcus, if you want to come up with something and send it around as a suggestion for that after the meeting, that'd be great.
Do that.
Just had a couple things.
Sure.
In the public communication portion under city councilors, there's a sentence about when responding to an email, comment, or question, whether from another councilor, staff member, or constituent, councilors are encouraged to copy the city council president. So the president should be copied on all emails that we send. That sounds like a lot. I don't think, speaking of unintended consequences and email workload.
Sounds perfect.
While I understand wanting
Not
to know,
my email.
I'll be frank, I'm not going to do it.
Can you remind me what that is?
So paragraph 2 under public communication, the
Yeah.
second paragraph is
Again, these are guidelines and aspirations. I'm just telling you now, I'm doing it.
about the middle of the paragraph. Oh,
Maybe you could just add a little,
it's
where
underlined. right there.
practicable, comma.
Sure.
Still not seeing it.
It's underlined.
Oh, look at that.
Thank you, Travis.
I'm having such a hard time. Oh,
Yeah, Elaine's suggestion of where practicable, sure, sounds good. I think some of it also just needs to come to some level of discretion. If something feels like it, that you should be copied in this one thing. But like when I did the
Yeah.
story time for the library a little while ago. I'm not gonna copy.
I don't want to know that.
You don't
Right,
need to know about that.
right.
I mean, you can send me a picture. Um, sorry, I finally found it.
Yeah.
When appropriate or practical,
When appropriate,
appropriate.
yeah,
Sure.
you know, I think.
use your judgment kind of call.
I think, and it gets, maybe we can even figure this, because I think the issue would only be if after the fact, if it turned out that, in either an inadvertent or however intentional comment ended up speaking for the board or the city, and then that wasn't appropriate, but that's the discretion part. So yeah, I'm just trying to think about, I do not want all those emails. No, I don't need to.
And along that same line of copying you and all the emails, that next sentence that says they may copy other counselors in this email thread, I really think we're opening ourselves up to open meeting law consequences that we might not be thinking of in that sense. And maybe taking that sentence out might be more beneficial in that risk management perspective. Frankly, if there's something we all should be notified about, it should be in the reading file or some agenda here.
I mean, if a counselor feels like, a concern they got from a constituent warrants sending it to the whole board, I think we already do that. Line copy and say, counselors on BCC do not respond for your information. And then typically we'll figure out who's going to respond. And often it's either Regina, myself.
But whether we should put out that the guidelines and practice is to send something out to everybody versus that just be a part of practice when it feels right.
Yeah, I agree with Andrew that maybe that sentence should come out because it could also just be more of a personal preference of the chair. Some chairs are less interested in being, frankly, in being copied on every piece of business, and other chairs are. So, and then if there is something the chair needs to pay attention to, then the whole thread can be forwarded to them. So that removing that sentence might be a good improvement.
So they may copy other counselors in the email thread, but they must avoid having any in-depth discussion amongst themselves via email regarding city business. That sentence.
No, not that one, the one before it.
One before it.
When responding to.
Right.
And then you can change the word they in the next sentence to counselors may copy other counselors.
Ashley, do you have that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Ashley?
Yes.
So I was saying to strike that whole sentence that they may copy other counselors in this email.
That's what
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Were you saying the when responding sentence or the they may copy?
That they may
sentence?
copy. I was saying strike that whole thing
That too?
from the. I was only saying to strike the whole portion of they may copy the where practicable or whatever the other phrase was that was used could be used in that sentence previous to that. My concern is the city putting out that as part of the policy of the city, encouraging counselors to copy everybody on our emails when open meeting law has many instances when we shouldn't do that type of stuff.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't think we want to put that out there.
You're
You
not
could-
concerned about the city council president getting all the email. You're concerned about everybody getting all the email.
And
Yeah.
open meeting law.
Got it.
a
I mean,
little-
we can put something in, counselors will be fully aware of and follow open meeting law when it's pretty much in here.
There's another section in here that
Yeah.
talks about open meeting
Right.
law.
So,
This sentence, my only concern is
Yeah.
that we are saying that it is okay to copy everybody on everything. And that's
not typically true.
right.
Okay, so yes, I agree with you, Andrew, but I also still think that other sentence, so the when responding sentence, I think could be a personal preference of a president as opposed to a policy. And then the they may copy sentence, I agree, encourages potential violation of open meeting law. So maybe both those sentences should come out. And we stick with if a resident communicates, that's like the next sentence.
I'm good with that. And there's one portion on that sentence when we're ready for it.
Would you agree with taking both of those sentences out?
I guess the delineation, generally, yes. I guess the delineation would be, if a resident is saying, Andrew, you're just using you right now.
Yep.
How do you feel about making Front Porch Forum citywide?
Mhm.
Versus what is the board going to do about Front Porch Forum? Or is the board going to ask? That sort of thing. The second one, I think, should probably be a consideration to include either the manager or the president or both. The first one, absolutely not.
Yep.
Right.
What you feel and how you communicate to a constituent is none of my business or the chair's business. So if we feel like we're all in agreement on that and that's obvious, then I don't think we need to put it in the policy. Is that what you're kind of getting at? I mean,
More succinctly.
okay.
Yeah, and to me, in that paragraph, the sentence that really summarizes what you just said, Raj, I think is the second sentence. And that to me is kind of the most important one to keep in there.
Okay. So I think we can get rid of both.
Okay.
Yep.
If that's what we're saying. Andrew, you had something in
The last part of just that last sentence is one of the things that I never did when I sat in that chair is when somebody had emailed all of us, I never sent anything out to everybody to say, I've got this, or I'm emailing, I'm responding. And I know that there were times where I would then get responses of, hey, did you ever get back to so-and-so about such and such? And I wonder if it would make sense to either for the chair to respond to everybody saying, I've got this, or this was addressed, or whether that email response gets put into the reading file. Something around that realm to make sure that everybody knows that something happened.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in that vacuum before. I'm not knowing, so
Yeah.
I don't know how folks feel about that. So you want to check on that? You want a follow-up on that, basically?
I'm good, I trust you. I'm perfectly fine. I just know what I heard when I sat in that chair.
So what are you saying we do with this then?
If we're having a policy that says the president should respond on behalf of the council when a resident communicates with the council, then we know that it's the president's responsibility to do it. So do we have to also say the president must let the council know that they did this? That feels a little redundant.
Or is it that you want to know what the response was too, which is totally valid? I mean, you're saying the second part of it, I think what you said was that should appear in the reading file. I think that's fair. I think the board should know how to respond.
I have definitely done that. Like when I was chair of the select board, when a resident emailed the whole board and I responded, the response went in the reading file. But it wasn't every email. It was
Right.
like depending upon whether it's relevant business or really important.
I don't know that we need it in there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I
Great.
think that's
So we've struck when responding to an email and the sentence they may copy other counselors. So 2 sentences from that paragraph.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Thanks all.
Amber, you good? Excellent. Thumb up. Great. I'm pretty sure we can adopt this as amended. If anybody's in the mood.
Do
for
we
that.
need to do the second half of this particular piece? Or
I mean, we could talk about and see if there's anything else we want to adjust this evening.
I mean, I think this second half of the conversation is over and above
Yeah.
the communications policy. I don't know that anything we say, I mean, whatever we say next might inform the communications policy. I think it's unlikely.
yeah, I guess I'm acknowledging whether or not, I don't know whether or not voting ends this topic.
Voting ends that topic,
Oh,
but we can
just
bring it
the-
up as much as we want in the next conversation.
Right.
Anyone in Zoom have any comments? Any members of the public have any comments on the communications policy we were just discussing? Please raise your hand. Anyone in the room? Okay, no. So I would entertain a motion
I'll move that the council adopt the revised communications policy as amended.
Second.
Excellent. Motion and a second. No further comments. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Motion passes 5-0. All right, so we're still in the same agenda item, but we're going to talk about communications in a slightly different way.
Okay. So, oh, Raj, I see a
We
hand.
do have a hand.
Oh, I apologize. Where'd that come from? I was just there. There it is. Well, sure. Raisa, I didn't see it before.
Okay, thank you. I think it was a Zoom thing.
Could you
'cause
do me a
I
favor,
think-
Raisa, and say your full name for the record?
Yes, Risa Marin, and I will fix it in Zoom so that you have it.
Thank you.
I did raise my hand in time, but I think Zoom was just being, Zoom.
No problem.
I think it's great. I love that you're coming up with a communications policy. The thing that I noticed not in here is anything in terms of endeavoring to respond within a time frame.
Endeavoring to
And I
respond
think-
within a what?
Time frame.
A
Oh,
time frame. Last meeting, somebody spoke very eloquently and had a proposal. And this meeting, the very next one, you're discussing it and making a decision about it, which is super fast. And I realize that not everything can happen that quickly, but there not being anything in here in terms of, when we get our however many numerous comments and emails and questions and everything from constituents, how quickly is our goal to respond? There's nothing about that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think my expectation for myself is 24 to 48 hours. I think there's two questions there, and one was around responding to an email. The other one was how things get brought up at a meeting. We will be having that meeting process discussion sometime in the next month or two, I believe, and that will come up then. Generally speaking, I think things get on the agenda in a number of different ways. In the case you brought up, Risa, as you probably realized this evening already, this tonight is oddly about largely one topic, two related topics, engagement and communication. So the Front Porch Forum topic last week just happened to fit perfectly in what we had already set aside. So it's a little bit coincidental and luck on Mr. Eustace's part about how that got brought up. So it's not necessarily a science, but we will be talking about meeting procedure, and agenda setting may come up as part of that in the next couple months.
Thank you.
All right. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything about this, Regina.
Yeah, just to sort of explain that this is the start of this conversation. I think as we've already talked about tonight, there is just a lot in this topic. There's a lot of different ways to figure out how to tackle it. And I do think the strategic planning process, certainly we will work to improve engagement in that process itself, but I have to imagine that one of the priority areas that's going to come out of that work is to improve our engagement with underrepresented folks as well. And so ultimately, I think we would probably be well suited with some kind of more official plan that talks a bit more about what is the level of engagement needed based on the type of process or project or policy we're working on. So I think there can be a lot more science to this down the road. At the moment, I wanted to just capture everything I've heard, at least in terms of individual specific ideas, since I've been here. And really, I think the benefit of in starting this conversation tonight is to just think through a brainstorm, some pros and cons, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's about it, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Thought a lot about how to have this conversation, but I think with this group, we'll just sort of dive right in. I think this list, as Regina said, came from all of us, essentially. So we can all pretty much identify what we brought to it. So, again, we're not trying to find a firm solution tonight. We're just trying to figure out what's missing from this, perhaps. Are there any of these that we can build on and start moving forward with now? What would that look like? Do we want to work? I mean, one of my curiosities is how do we work as a team and with an intentional schedule, for instance, or plan for outreach, perhaps a calendar, and it's just one idea. So I don't know if anybody wants to start this off. Looking at Andrew because he's wearing red.
So you're
Just kidding.
no, dude, I have nothing to add. I see many of the things on this list from conversations I've had with Regina since Regina's been on here, and through those random emails I might send that say, "Hey, Regina, random thought. Here's one." In terms of things we could do with budgeting, for example, there's a whole host of things we can do differently. Some of which are very small, some of which are more significant. I could talk for probably 20 to 30 minutes on some of them. I don't think that's the point of tonight. So I'm kind of unsure where to go.
Fair.
So I kind of feel the same way, but at the same time, to acknowledge the fact that we have a communications expert in the room. So I'm kind of curious, again, what our communications director believes strategically would be beneficial to Essex Junction.
Well,
Because I can add to this
yeah,
list,
yeah, no,
but
and when this topic was brought up, I go, oh, this could go one of two ways. I appreciate you asking my opinion on this. I am a very deep person when it comes to doing our research first, and we analyze that, and then we find how we're going to communicate, and then we are evaluating how we're going to communicate. And I feel like we're missing that research piece. We don't know how our community wants to engage with us. So we can throw a ton of things, and we can do 50 coffee chats a year and do, all this kind of online stuff. But is that really, are we reaching these people? And is that how they want to be reached? And I think those are the questions we need to be asking first before we start coming up with the tactics, which is what this is, to accomplish that. I keep going back to the strategic plan, and Regina mentioned that as well. I feel like we will get some of that data from there, but we can do other outreach as well. I don't want to fatigue our people before we get to strategic planning, because we're going to be asking a lot from our community to give us feedback. Like I mentioned earlier, though, engagement isn't something you do in a project that's going to start. It is something that we need to build into everything we do from the ground up. So when we say we're going to do a pocket park or do this, we need to be starting with engagement first and communication first, not at the back end after we say, hey, we've got this great idea. We need to be saying, do you like this idea? What do you think? And it needs to be short bursts of those conversations. We could throw out a question if our community is used to those kind of avenues of this is how we're going to communicate with. And part of that is me establishing that. And I will admit, my first year, I didn't want to change anything because we're in transition. And you come into a new position, you're not going to change anything your first year, or you're going to have a big pitfall. I've found that in my 10 plus years of career. I did that at the very beginning and it was not a good idea. So I'm a very much thing about evaluating the situation. And plus, again, like I said, we've been in transition. So that was for me, I don't want to start something that might change in 5 to 6 months kind of thing. That's my take at this initially.
Thank you. So to play off that, and I agree with your points. I think there's two things. First off, I will acknowledge that during my campaign, it was something I spoke about a great deal. It was something that I heard a great deal about. But I think that if I could try to summarize a couple of things, I thought it was based on two factors. One, the community having knowledge about what's happening in their community, and then accessibility to its government. Those were the two main factors I felt during those engagements that I had. So when I think about the list and we think about how we're going to do this work or what we're going to do around this work, I think that for me, there should be a strategic tact into how we communicate and how we engage. But I also think that if we wait for that, we're going to miss a lot of opportunities, and the community's not going to have some opportunities to engage with us. So I would like to see some things happen in the short term that allows the community to engage us. And then we'll work on getting to that point where we have a plan that really helps to engage further.
I mean, one of the reasons this is coming up now is because we have a strategic planning process coming up that's going to help inform us on how to engage the community. But we need to engage the community to get people on the steering committee and participate in the strategic planning process that we haven't normally reached. And we haven't been very successful in doing that. So we are going to have to make some slightly non-data driven decisions and throw some darts that miss between now and 3 months to kind of get that more clumsy outreach attempted. But
then I would say as a council, you guys come up with what is your goal? What is your goal in the next 6 months? And I can help with that and just help you, like, here's some, thoughtful goals. And then we start building some of these things around that.
Okay.
And I definitely think that we can do that easily, and I'd be happy to help start that process.
I don't necessarily think we need to go through all of these one by one tonight at all. But I think exploring what Ashley just described would be worthwhile, and whether that's conversation at the next few meetings, 1 or 2 meetings, and fleshing that out, whether that's conversations in the background and bringing stuff to the council for feedback as appropriate and legal. If Andrew and Marcus just spent time on the committee, if there's 1 or 2 of us that want to work more closely with Ashley to Amber can't tell I'm looking at her on the screen. She knows.
She just went off screen. Can I share some thoughts?
Sure.
about
Please
it?
do.
Okay. So I have a lot of thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So I took some notes. So I'm just going to go through them, and hopefully they're germane and helpful. I think there's 2 things that we need to talk about: how our government communicates and how the council communicates. And our communication is somewhat different in some respects, because we're getting out there wanting to know, what do you think? Tell us what you want, that kind of thing. But then we're also supporting the government communication of, we're having a meeting or we need a committee member. So there's 2 kinds of comms we're talking about here. In my opinion, there isn't a standard communications protocol for how our government shares information. And way back when the Essex Governance Group communication program or report was submitted, one of the recommendations we made was for a communications policy, a standard protocol across staff for how information is communicated And it was based on the model from Portland, Oregon. I think it was Oregon, not me. And it was basically a rubric. And down one side was the importance of the topic, and across the other side was the extent of the broadcasting of the information. And so if one street is getting a new street light, all you need to do is send an email to all the residents on that street. But if you're, like just, it radiated out in terms of quantity of communication and distance. I need to dig that out. Or if you go to the Essex governance group, it's an appendix in there. It's a really excellent model. And I think it's very important that we include how our government, how our staff consistently communicates from department to department, all the information that needs to get out there. I think we actually do already know a lot of the ways that we communicate and how our residents want to be communicated with. We are on Front Porch Forum. We are all over Facebook. We are posting to the Essex Reporter when, online. It's going to be in print soon. Like we know where a lot of our residents want their information to come from. It's the new places that we need to figure out. What are the things that we could do to enhance that, to expand it? When we were doing OVOV, one of the questions we always had was, how do we communicate with renters? How do we get in those apartment buildings? How do we build relationships with the property managers that will allow us to get that information to the people who live in those apartments? And we have lots of apartments. So where are those gaps that we have that we need to identify? That's really important. On the more immediate level, Marcus, you posted on Front Porch Forum the other day, coffee with a counselor. I think a really quick short-term thing is we formalize that, and coffee with a counselor happens every 2 weeks and it rotates, or it happens once a month and it rotates, and we all do it.
How many people came?
4.
And were they
Yeah.
repeats?
They're people I know in the community, but not to my events.
I mean, and if
I'm not against it, and there's nothing against repeats.
Yeah.
That's great. I just feel like, we need to figure out how to bring that to neighborhoods and to apartment buildings and to
Right.
those other micro communities, and really, really, really think about when, how, where, and get creative with, maybe we have to hold a few more events a year and make some of this event. I'm interrupting you. I apologize.
No, it's okay, but you're right. I mean, we can standardize how that works. Mayor Weinberger in Burlington goes to the same diner every Thursday morning. People know where to find him. We could do something like that, but that I don't want to derail into that, how we actually pull that off, but that's a thing we could do very quickly, very easily. The last thing I'm going to say, and this is related to the Essex Governance Group as well, it is time for neighborhood assemblies. It's part of it's the final recommendation of the governance group that we did not get to yet because we were waiting. We were going to merge first, and now we've separated. And now I think it really is the time, especially with the committee you referred to earlier, getting ready to talk about governance in general. Neighborhood assemblies doesn't have to start out as a full governmental entity, but we could start small with identifying neighborhoods and making them places to communicate. And then as that takes hold, we lift them up more in terms of quantity of information, responsibility, the way we talk to them, and what kind of feedback we get. But I really think it's important, and it's time for us to start building a model of neighborhood assemblies. That's going to be work. It's going to require staffing, but I think that's where we're headed if we want to have more really hyper-local communication between city government and residents. /and soapbox.
The soapbox is great. So moving this forward, we can do a number of different things. I mean, we can pick from this list and try to get a couple of things going with the goal, or we can work a little more intentionally behind the scenes for 2 or 3 more weeks, and flesh out a plan for 1 or 2, trying to build towards some success around fleshing out that steering committee and finding people.
At the risk of adding more to my plate, I would be willing to volunteer to talk to Ashley one-on-one about this list and maybe prioritizing and coming back to the council with another draft.
Yeah.
I will acknowledge that, again, I believe that we should do this. Strategically, there should be something, but I think that in the long term, that's where we need to be and go. But I don't think that I want to wait. And I will be honest that I will continue to do coffee with the counselor because I think it's important. I think that making sure the community has access to the council is important. And I think that, look, for me in the last couple that I ran, no, they didn't have the turnouts that I wanted them to have. But at the same time, for myself, I needed to kind of figure out how I can do this. But I hope that we can figure out a way to do this better. But in the short term, I just don't want to wait for another couple of months to have something kind of running when the community I know wants to talk to us.
We're going to approve in a consent agenda. We're probably going to approve a block party tonight. So I'll volunteer to go to the block, to ask if I can go to the block. Request a nice invitation to go to the block party if they'll have me for a few minutes, maybe near the end. But that's the kind of thing I'm thinking as well, or maybe we just host them.
That's a great idea.
And I will suggest too that these opportunities that you guys are already starting, we could have a standard 2 questions that you're going to ask. How do you want to be engaged with? And how are you currently engaged with council? 2 simple things that you could bring that feedback back, and we can start micro doing that data, which I think will help.
Can I just say one more observation? I can't resist. In spite of our best efforts, we are never going to communicate with everybody, or even 50%. Because there are people in the world who don't interact with their government at all unless they get a ticket or they're paying a bill at the clerk's office. And they are not interested, and that is okay. I just want to put that, we always try so hard to reach as many people as possible. And to be honest, getting feedback from 35% of the local community, that's like huge success statistically. So I just want to temper our expectations that it's, we're going to do our very, very best, and we're still not going to hit everybody. So, or hear from everybody. And when we do hear from people, they're mad. Right? I mean, that is when you get there. It's either a super contentious issue or a really passionate issue. But when there's people in those chairs, that means they have something to say.
For me, and it's not about quantity; it's about who.
Sure, absolutely.
Right? We all know who we hear from all the time,
right?
And who feels comfortable being able to be angry in public in front of someone. And it's the people that don't necessarily feel like they have that voice that I'm absolutely most interested in trying to figure out how to reach.
Absolutely.
And I think everybody agrees with that.
One thing I would like to also bring up, and because I think it's probably better to bring this up now than during our FPF discussion, is as I was looking through the materials for the upcoming FPF discussion, I acknowledge the fact that you have 8 opportunities to put something out there. And I was starting to think about the number of times I think we might need to engage the community. Like, for instance, just our committees alone. What communication is going out about the committee meetings or these committee agendas? We send out information about ourselves. I think we send out some stuff about DRB or planning, or maybe both, but it's only 8 interactions in a year. It really seemed like
a month.
A month. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. No, if it was a year, that would be.
That's better. Okay. 'Cause I felt like, is this enough? Is this at all enough?
Yeah.
So, okay, that makes me feel better. Sorry, I misread it. It's on me.
But that brings up
But-
a really important point. Like, can we just segue into the front porch forum
One,
conversation?
I just wanted one thing on his comment.
Okay.
Some of this may be structural and tool-based, you know. We need to figure out a way to get people to be able to sign up. I don't know what the status of our ability right now to send out newsletters, to have people. It doesn't seem incredibly simple for people to throw an email address or to do something like that right now. And
Do you mean on the website, like when we send out news? I
yeah,
just
we're
wanna
just
clarify.
capturing willing people to give us their information so we can get information back out to them. And it kind of goes to what you were saying earlier about figuring out how to reach more closed off communities like apartment buildings and everything. But that was all I was going to say. Sorry, go ahead and segue. Actually, somebody wants to comment before we
Oh,
finish
yep,
this. So,
yep. In a chat.
Ashley, I think I cut you off. No?
What I was gonna say. So you're fine. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? Amber? Okay. Anyone in the room have a comment about this topic? No? Okay. On Zoom, let me pull up Zoom. Elise Serta.
Heidi ho, neighbors.
Hello.
Well, I wanted to just point at something that Ashley brought up that I think is very important, and I think may have gotten lost in the stampede towards tactics, which is goals. And what are your goals for engagement? Because ultimately, is your goal to engage to inform? Is it to be informed? And then how are you going to measure its success? That's critical because there are all these things that you can do from a tactic standpoint. And because you don't have the data necessarily up front that Ashley's talking about, how are you going to measure that these are effective? What does success look like? Is a coffee chat enough that you're showing it up on a regular basis? Is it the amount of people who show up? So I just really encourage the council to work with Ashley to come up with what those engagement goals are, because that will help inform the strategic planning, but also make sure that you're spending your resources in the right places. You guys are all volunteers. You're very busy. You have personal lives. You have council lives. So, you know, getting the most bang out of your buck is really important. And how are you going to measure that? And I'm sure Ashley is an expert at helping you do that. So I really encourage you to use her expertise because I know how valuable that can be if utilized. The other thing that I will, and it sounds like Councilman Serta and I are in lockstep here, but people have been complaining about the communication avenues for a very long time. So I think even if it's a short-term survey that you put out really quickly, that could gather some of the basics might be really helpful. But I'll just say from my experience, and you guys are on it, Front Porch Forum is critical to our community and is where a majority of our people get their news. So utilizing that, I think, is in my opinion, really critical. But thank you so much for taking on communications. It's close to my heart, as everybody knows, but I think you have a great opportunity here. But I do think it has to have some measurement so you're not just spinning like a top. Thank you.
Thank you.
I look forward to the debate later.
Okay, we better move on. Moving right on.
Window in the alley.
Yeah. Front Porch Forum. Well, let's back up a second. Regina,
Yeah,
Ashley,
can I just,
do you feel, yeah, Regina, let's
yeah.
hear what you have to say.
So before we jump off this topic, I would like a little clarity on next steps. So Elaine offered to sit with Ashley and narrow down this list or prioritize this list, which I think could be helpful. The other thing we could just do with this list is throw it into the big list of things that are going to go through strategic planning and see what rises to the top there. But to Elise's point and Ashley's earlier point, the best next step might be figuring out what those goals and metrics are. And Ashley, I don't know if that's something that you could take an initial crack at drafting, what those might be. or if that's asking too much.
No, I think I can definitely take a stab at it. Obviously, your feedback is critical because you guys are going to be doing some of the work, and hopefully a lot of the work, because you'll be doing the engagement pieces within the community as well. Obviously, I'm there to assist you in any way as possible, but it's got to be something that you guys adopt and are behind, because if not, it's not going to go anywhere. And so I would say I'm happy to start drafting some goals that I feel would be beneficial for you, and then we can move from there.
I think that'd be great. So we're doing that.
Okay.
So we're going to do that and hold on the list with Elaine, or we do it, we come back maybe, what's the time frame on that, do you think, Ashley? Or Regina?
Tuesday? Kidding. Just kidding.
That was him.
Just kidding.
He's just anticipating.
Obviously also, I just want to preface, I'm fixing to start the strategic planning process as well. So,
Yes.
so I would say, let me start working on this process in the next couple of weeks. And then I would definitely be able to mention to Regina where I'm at in the process,
Okay.
but hopefully
Sounds
in the
great.
next month, have something to you guys to start looking at.
Okay.
Thank you.
And sorry, I missed one other next step that I heard, which was something that I think we can definitely look into also is the appendix that Elaine was talking about based on Portland, so that we can, because like Elaine said, I think that was good, really awesome, helpful way to think about it. We're talking about two separate things. The government communications, basically, from the staff out, and then what you folks are doing on the council end. So I think what we're talking about in terms of the goals and metrics are a little bit more in assistance to you folks as the council. I think that that appendix document we will definitely find and take a look at in terms of standardizing the government communication. And then that third next step about sort of prioritizing this brainstorm list, and if that's helpful or needed at this stage.
I think looking at the list in the context of getting strategic planning going, and figuring out the most efficient use of resources to populate that process is important. So, sort of alongside the goals and all of that, if I recall the timeline from an hour, looking at the work from the strategic plan, that's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all going to have to figure out how to schedule time in to do whatever it is we're going to prioritize. So I think that sort of has to almost go hand in hand. I don't know that we can wait a month to start really diving into picking 2 or 4 things, making this up, to try that to really dive into and lean into in terms of actions that we can take, or at least start talking about what those look like. Are they feasible? What kind of time does it take? How will we split that up? How is that split up with staff? Or how to, what's the role there? We're going to do the work. How can staff, I don't know that we can wait a month, but that's you're wrapped up in the strategic planning process. So if my recollection was it was going to start October-ish.
Oh, well, it's supposed to technically start as soon as after we get the contract signed.
Okay.
Right? So August, September was when this was supposed to start, was the initial, what they had put in their proposal as well. Obviously, that contract has to be, we have to get the contract, it has to be reviewed by legal, all that kind of stuff before we can start the process. I can start working on this, though, in the meantime.
Okay.
And then hopefully come to you guys as soon as possible. Obviously, that strategic plan needs to go along this with the committee members and deciding who that's going to be and how much you guys are going to be involved with that process as well. So I will say they kind of need to align together too.
Okay. I will wait to hear from you.
Yes.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you for this, Ashley.
Appreciate the conversation and the work. All right. Front Porch Forum.
Okay, so as you guys all know, Steve Eustace met with the city council and asked us to consider contacting Front Porch Forum to discuss changing the Essex Junction forums to one, they call them forum and, or neighborhood instead of the four that it currently is. We currently do pay Front Porch Forum the $2,808 a year. It gives us 17 accounts that's split up amongst you guys and the staff. Who usually have two posts a month. There's two other, myself and Wendy have more posts just because she is the only one from the library posting, so she gets extra to post all their events. And then because of my position where I'm posting for lots of different things, I have more posts as well. And so a little bit breakdown, this is just what's in their invoice to us every year about what we get for that fee. And then right now I broke down what those forums are, the south, the north, the countryside, and the Fairview farms. Those are the ones that are just Essex Junction. And we, as staff and as you guys can post into all these 5. So when I post to all these 5. I will preface and say that I also still have access to the town as well, their forums, because we do have interactions with the police department and with the assessor still. So in the event there's something that there's a tie over that I would need to post on behalf for both of those, or if Tammy, for instance, she can still post in Essex Junction as well because of that still continued tie that we have. So right now, it's basically if you guys are interested in making this change, we can move forward with talking to Front Porch Forum about that and going from there.
I mean, I'm curious what you all think about this number for like capacity that we have to post for them. Do we need to increase it? I've never had a conversation about where this sits. Is there an opportunity to renegotiate? That's one question I have for tonight, or to find out for later. I can tell you for myself, 2 is very limiting. But sort of the way Front Porch Forum works.
Because your question is valid, but I think what I read here again is us having a discussion around whether or not we're going to make this ask of Front Porch Forum. This fee does not create these 5 neighborhoods, is my understanding. We are not in control of these 5 neighborhoods or the decision around this. We would just be sharing an opinion. So while we should discuss the fee and use and all that, I just want to be clear because I think there's some confusion in the public in regard to, again, our participation in this and our authority in this. So I want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah. So yeah, again, we don't have control over what the neighborhoods are, or that's all Front Porch Forum. They have decided where the cutoff is on all of this and who's in what neighborhoods. We don't have any control over that.
Yes.
So I had been in a conversation with Michael Wood Lewis, the founder from Porch Forum, and we were talking about Essex Junction. And one thing he did point out is that most municipalities, the balance of resident postings to government postings is like 80% resident, 20% government. And it's kind of the opposite in Essex Junction. We're one of the only municipalities that really uses it to its fullest capacity in terms of the quantity of posts that municipality is allowed to have. And that's why there's a limit, because it has, for us, has kind of become a city newsletter. And their goal is to encourage more of the, can you help me find my cat? Can you help me move? I've got plants to get rid of. Like, their goal is to foster community conversation. And that's happening in other municipalities, but the way we use it, that does happen, but it's far more that we post governmental things. So it's just an observation. It's not a judgment or anything. It's just, that's how we use it. And so we are already bumping up against what they consider to be the fullest capacity of municipal postings. So, but that said, Michael has also said that they're very willing to take suggestions and they work with municipalities all the time. I don't like, in my opinion, if it all was one email, everyone would still get the same posts, because when I look at the same, all the five, because we get all five of them every day, and I look at all of them every day, there's overlap in all of them because you can cross post. And so people I don't think people should be worried that they're going to lose connection with a particular neighborhood, their own neighborhood, because they will continue to see those posts. They will also see posts from other neighborhoods. So it's not like anything is going away. It's like aggregating it instead.
I mean, the only reason I'm interested in having this conversation because someone brought it to us, but it fit in with tonight, and it fits in with the greater concern we all have about how we reach everybody. I think Front Porch Forum, I don't know the rhyme or reason behind how they came up with this. I don't think it does make a little sense to me, but what's ended up happening is they've sort of separated the village in very interesting ways, demographically, in a number of different ways. And I think I said this back to Sue McCormick online. I mean, when we were having the merger discussion, the idea of wards and districts came up. And we would never have drawn wards in this way, with these demographics or with this. We would never have considered these in any way sort of diverse delineations of our community, in the widest sense or the narrowest sense. And, a bear doesn't recognize a Front Porch Forum boundary when going from compost pile to compost pile. So, I think what was striking to me in Steve's argument was the number of households in each one. One being 299, roughly 1900, roughly 1950, and 113. This doesn't tell me that this represents a breakdown of the city. So I don't really know, frankly, if it's our role to make a request at all of Front Porch Forum, but because we're a board in the community and we can make contact with them and have a conversation, I think it's fine. I don't know that I have a specific request of them myself, except to say, can you look at this again and say, if you had to do it again, how would you do it? Because my personal opinion is that it doesn't represent any sort of, well, basically what I just said. So that's my only, I don't necessarily want to. The other thing about Front Porch Forum is you can cross post. You can go on their website and see all of them. Anybody can. Even if you're not in that neighborhood, you can still pull down and see what's going on in the neighborhood next to you. So I'm not sure how huge an issue this is. But Andrew, anything?
It's always bothered me that Fairview and Countryside get their own forums. Just has always felt exclusionary. To that end, they are a private company. There's limited things that we can do other than say the city council wishes that you would reconsider your drawings of your districts or your neighborhoods, since they're not reflective of the diverse community that Essex Junction is. To the point of how much duplication there is, the number of times I go through them and I thought I just deleted that email because I just read these exact same posts.
Exactly.
It feels like there's a lot of duplication. From my perspective, I'm completely fine asking Front Porch Forum to relook at the way they've divided the community up based from the conversation we just had about goals. I would hope that Front Porch Forum would want to engage the community in that conversation. Maybe we are just those 5 individuals who would inform that process, but hopefully not. And they could ask the community how they would like to see it changed. But yeah, I'm open to change, whether it's 1 or 2. Fine by me.
I seem to recall years ago, we had even more Front Porch Forum neighborhoods. We had like 9 at one point. It was ridiculous. And they collapsed them without any, they didn't reach out to the community at all. They just said, you know what, there's a lot of, we're going to reduce this for whatever reason from their end. So I don't know that they do a community involvement process when they make those decisions.
You know, it could be financial too. I mean, they do sell ads.
Yep.
And coming from an industry that just was destroyed by not having ads, I want to respect the fact that they may be keeping 4 or 5 districts to make sure that there are 4 or 5 different newsletters that have ads in them, and I can't say I blame them if that's what they're doing. That's a business model. So I think we have to keep that in mind too. And I just don't know the answer, but I don't know if Amber, anything? Regina, I don't think you've said anything yet. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think from my perspective, this is good conversation. I think it's worth more conversation with Front Porch Forum, or just suggesting to them and asking these questions of them. I did receive one email, which I shared with you folks, of somebody who thought that this was not a good idea from the community. I didn't see any other comments. And certainly there is no rush or anything on this topic. So no need to do anything tonight.
I also want to say too, someone else brought this up to me when I was away, sort of an outsider perspective. They asked, wouldn't you reach out to a company that was operating in your community if they thought they could operate better in your community? And I was like, yeah, actually we would. And I think that's all we're doing, is having a conversation about engaging with a company we think might have a better way of doing things for and in our community. So I know a lot of people seem upset about that we're talking about this, but I don't see it any differently than a conversation we'd have with any other company that was working here. If we thought that something could be improved.
To that particular point, I think about the discussion that happened over noise, and I remember the council, well, at that time, the trustees, talking with the haulers and engaging the haulers to try to improve the situation there.
Yep.
I think that, again, I acknowledge what you've all said, and especially what Andrew just again reminded us, that this is a private business. I'm happy to acknowledge the fact that I think if I were mapping this out myself, yes, I agree with you, Raj. I would not draw these lines in the same way either. So I'm happy to just acknowledge that, but again, I want to make sure the public is aware. It's not our decision.
Yep.
And we're engaging in this conversation because a member of the public asked us to have this discussion. So happy to do that on behalf of them.
Great. I don't feel like any further action is needed from us, but I suspect this will just be part of communication and engagement conversations we have going forward. But if there's nothing else from the council or from staff?
There is one thing. I mean, I do think that we can certainly ask Front Porch Forum to be a part of the conversation.
Mhm.
And I don't think it would hurt to have the city council say, we want to be a part of this conversation. We want our community to be a conversation. As Front Porch Forum's mission is to help neighbors connect and build community. So hopefully they would be open to engaging the community in how they engage the community. I don't think it's outside of our purview to ask for that.
Do you want to formally ask staff to reach out to them and have that opportunity?
Sure.
Great. We can Regina, we don't need a motion to ask for, we could invite them in for a future meeting where it fit and have this conversation with them when this general topic comes up again. Or we can just reach out and try to schedule something, for a meeting or a conversation where it works for them. I don't know that we need a motion to have an action.
Yeah, no, I don't think you need a motion either. so long as you're clear, there's consensus, if that's what you would like us to do, we can, we
think
can bring the
Andrew put it
message
well.
forward.
You know,
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
all right. I'm just looking to see if there's a hand. Yes, Risa, you'd like to join us?
Thank you. I did try and change how my name shows, and Zoom isn't keeping it, even though I've changed it many times. I'm still researching. I just wanted to point out, Countryside neighborhood has 566 members, which makes me think that Steve's numbers are just a little off. And also, those of you who regularly read Front Porch Forum will note that for Countryside and my other 3 that I can post in, I regularly post for Essex Junction Dems when there's a meeting. And I'm mentioning this because there's somebody who regularly posts for Essex West. So is that one of those quote unquote neighborhoods that sort of spans Essex and Essex Junction?
Boundaries for Essex West used to include my neighborhood and no longer does.
No longer does.
It
Okay,
includes
thank you.
portions of Pinecrest, Susie Wilson, and the name of the neighborhood off of Pinecrest that I cannot remember. But it does not include the Warner Villa Edgewood neighborhood any longer.
Okay. When Front Porch Forum first started, I was in Burlington, and at that point, my Front Porch Forum neighborhood was my very short street. It was literally just our street. The next street over was a different neighborhood. So they've regularly changed this. In Countryside, and I hear you, Andrew, that it feels exclusionary that Countryside and Fairview Farms have their own. I don't know how that came to be, but in Countryside, we regularly use it as what's happening with Jews, what's happening with this, what's happening with things that are truly specific to Countryside, which wouldn't interest people outside of Countryside. Yeah, bears don't know, one neighborhood from another, but there have been things in the, I guess it's Five Corners North section that, well, this doesn't really apply to me because it's not my area, other than I hear what Pleasant Street is going through, so I'm doing everything I can to avoid driving on Pleasant Street while Brickyard is closed. But I'm one of those people who wants it to stay the same. And, hopefully Front Porch Forum will do the right thing for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just mention
Sure.
one quick thing? To the point of Steve's numbers, his numbers were based on households, and what Rachel was referring to are members. So the difference there is because in Countryside, there are 568 members from 299 households. So that's why there might be a discrepancy there.
Thank you.
Bridget.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have strong feelings about creating one or more Front Porch Forum. I read it every day, and I'm coming at it with a little bit. I'm hearing what Elaine says about how Michael would like it to be more resident, postings rather than government or council or whatever postings. It's interesting. I live on Pleasant Street. We have two communication forums that aren't Front Porch Forum. On Front Porch Forum, it's more I don't know how to even say what it is, but we have the Pleasant Street Neighborhood Facebook page, and that's where you go to borrow a crib or something like that, because it happens instantaneously. That's another big deal. So somebody says, "Oh my God, my daughter's coming with her infant. We need a crib." Within 15 minutes, that person has a crib. And we have also an email, the Nice List, which is an email communication form. So I think it's interesting, though, when you think about it, because if he's wanting Front Porch Forum to be that, yeah, I don't know how in our neighborhood that would ever change. We're pretty connected, it's just like done, done, done. I mean, so I'm not sure how that would ever translate to a Front Porch. I think people see Front Porch Forum differently. That's what I think I'm trying to say. It's more formal-ish. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how we could ever change the complexion of that, but it would be an interesting thing to try. And I think partly the reason that we have our communications, and maybe I think Countryside has another way of communicating as well. I think partly it's because the answer is instantaneous, pretty much. The answer to your question is quick and solid. I don't know. To me, in Essex Junction, I'm as concerned and interested in what's happening in Fairview, Countryside, Cascade, Raj's neighborhood, Athens Drive, Autumn Pond. It's all the same to me. And I do read the other forums, but it's often so repetitive. It's the same thing. So I don't know how to fix that, but maybe Front Porch Forum, I think it's a great idea to talk to them, because they may have faced this somewhere else and have figured out a way to combine and make it more personal, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. If there's nothing else, I think we'll move on. Marcus, you asked the minutes to be pulled out for adjustment.
Yeah. So in the minutes, I believe it was line 191, if I recall, my name is misspelled.
That is important.
Well, yeah. Yes.
I'm curious how they did it. Oh, works.
It is 191. Yep.
Do we need to, I can never remember this. We need to, okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second? I'll second. Marcus, second.
First off,
Motion,
Marukas.
Marukas? Second. No, that's going to be in the minute.
Stop it, man.
You're a horrible person.
You're welcome.
All those in favor of approving the amended minutes without Andrew's commentary, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So
What we need to do was the Acorn Circle
That's in the consent agenda.
that's in the consent agenda.
Yeah. Do I have a motion
We
to approve the
the
consent
consent agenda
as amended?
as amended with the
Perfect.
Acorn Circle block party request.
Second.
Great. Elaine and Marcus, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Reading file. Regina, do you have anything tonight?
I don't have very much tonight. Just to say that thank you all the staff and Jess for covering my job while I'm over here in Maine. And I understand that the rains have been a little tough on the Brickyard project, so they are doing a lot of water pumping out of there instead of being able to advance things. So hopefully the weather starts cooperating soon. And again, just to be clear, pretty small problems for us that we are dealing with as opposed to other communities in the state. So
Thank you. Thanks for joining us too on your break. I don't have anything. Amber, God, I can't see that. Sorry, Amber, I didn't see the hand again.
It just went up.
Okay.
I was just going to note that one of the things that's in our reading file is the delinquent tax memo. And I would hope at a future meeting that we can have the policy regarding delinquent taxes and when they go to tax sale as a discussion item.
Great.
I just had one thing.
Sure.
Last meeting, it was the first meeting we met since the flood. And while I know the flooding wasn't bad here in our city, Regina, I don't know if you could talk at all about some of the experiences from staff who have to come into the city who may not live here, and just some of the difficulty that they may have faced.
So Jamie took an ATV through the woods because he couldn't get out of his own road himself to get to, I believe it was his father's house, to get another vehicle to then drive that so he could be here at work. So
Wow.
pretty phenomenal dedication.
Pretty awesome, Jamie.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else.
Move adjourn.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Hi.
Opposed? Forever be banished.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Regina, I will try not to bother you
That's not true.
much more. Again.